Why does Dead by Daylight have a community that doesn't foster horror fans? Going on Twitter after Behavior's 10-year anniversary teaser stream was something of a moderate to incredible annoyance for me, and yes, I do think that the 12-hour stream should have been a shadow drop instead of something announced at a relatively insane time, but the 10th anniversary chapter for Dead by Daylight was never going to be anybody but Jason. I saw plenty of complaints about how Jason was going to be Trapper 2 just because he uses a machete, or that Jason was simply going to be another guy in a mask. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of Jason inherently. Jason is the guy in a mask. As far as mainstream serial killers in horror go, with Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974, Halloween in 1978, and then Friday the 13th in 1980, all three horror icons have their faces hidden. Yes, but Bubba Sawyer has the flesh of his victims, Michael with a, well, Halloween mask, and Jason with his hockey mask. But while all these three are pillars of modern horror, all three serial killers, they don't necessarily just do the same thing over and over again. They get to the same finish line of murder, but with different methodology. Leatherface has his chainsaw, Michael Myers is more of a stalker type, and Jason is the slasher. When you're thinking of modern horror, which admittedly, at least in these three's case, is almost 50 years old at this point, you have a lot of the big names in Dead by Daylight already. The aforementioned two, Leatherface and Michael Myers. You have Freddy Krueger, you have Ghostface, the Cenobite, a Xenomorph, Chucky, iconic pillars of what's been becoming old head horror. But there's been one big name missing from this list for years, as he's been tied up in licensing hell for basically as long as he's been around, and he still kind of is, but Jason Voorhees. He's one of, if not the last big name to actually get into Dead by Daylight for Behavior. And they've been, forgive my horse pun, chomping at the bit to get him in essentially since the game's inception. But back to the video's point, do Dead by Daylight players, those that play an active game based around icons of horror, even like horror? I can understand being disappointed that someone's favorite license doesn't get in over another. There are plenty that I personally wouldn't want to see, and those that I favor more strongly, like Nemesis. But for a 10-year anniversary, they're not just going to put in, like, some chud. I'm not saying a lot of ideas that people have are inherently bad, and Dead by Daylight does this great thing where they can put a horror spin on things that are maybe a little lighter on the horror side of things. Like, Tokyo Ghoul is one of the most notable examples for a character that I don't think would really fit in if they put him in one-to-one. So they took a version of Kaneki at his lowest, rather than just the canon Ken Kaneki. But I see a lot of these things like, oh, let's get for Dead by Daylight, and it's just something that kind of misses the mark. I'm saying this one as a Halo fan. I even have a tattoo from the series. Halo would not fit Dead by Daylight. Could Behavior do something to make it more terrifying? Sure, but the dissonance from the lore of Halo versus what everyone knows the game series for, being the shoot alien game with overarching religious themes, isn't scary. Now, would the idea of an alien race wanting to wipe out humankind be terrifying if it were to actually happen? Yeah. But the presentation of media matters, and while Halo, most notably Halo 1, might have horrifying moments, it is not a horror game. And it would be over the line of what I consider to actually be horror, the actual point of Dead by Daylight, as the Hall of Horror, basically. Personally, I even think collaborations like Lara Croft or Geralt of Rivia, and especially the Rainbow Six collab skins, are over the line of what I consider to be horror. And while Behavior does disagree with this, as their rules for what makes a survivor are significantly more lax than they are for killer collabs. Licensure is tricky, as I fully believe Behavior could translate many source materials into a good killer that fits the game, at least gameplay-wise, but things like Vecna, the purple one, not the pink one, might also be pushing it a little bit. A lot of licenses I see people suggest aren't even putting a tentative toe over the line, but they are full-on dolphin diving over it. Maybe I'm a purist, in sort of a way, but there has to be a line drawn somewhere because a good bit of the time the idea of horror Fortnite goes a bit far. Matthew Cote is like Ahab, and there's no way that it would have been anything other than Behavior's white whale for a 10-year milestone. I haven't done anything for 10 years. Of course, Behavior was going to get the final pillar of horror. I get that a lot of people, even me, honestly, could be disappointed if the chapter wasn't something a little bit more modern. Like let's think Slenderman for internet horror, or even It, due to its recent movies, despite the book coming out in 1986. Wow, I genuinely didn't know it was that old. But feeling a slight disconnect as a result of it not being something more modern. Horror that people my age, or younger, didn't really grow up with. People more my age never really got an opportunity to see a modern Jason due to the aforementioned licensing hell that's preventing him from being in more media in the cultural zeitgeist, aside from like the Friday the 13th game. But speaking of games, Slender is and was humongous. I played this in middle school on my laptop before I even knew what horror was, and this isn't even comparing how big It is. A book that I've read, movies that I've seen, etc. I know there's a show, I haven't seen that, but I've heard it's also very good. But think about it like this. How big are these things to the average person? I would bet you, maybe a little unfairly, that if you went up to your dad or your mom or anybody on the street and said, do you know who Jason Voorhees is? Versus, do you know who Slenderman is? They would more likely than not know who Jason is. And that's kind of the entire point. Old head horror is going to be more known by old heads, obviously, but a big part of Dead by Daylight is the ability to introduce new media to new people that haven't seen it before. Dead by Daylight is even how I began to play Resident Evil. If you don't know the horceror, I started playing Dead by Daylight because of a cow chop video with my friends back in 2017. And then I came back to playing the game and being a content creator. I say that loosely because I didn't really make content. I started streaming in 2020, horceror's pandemic activity. I played mainly Survivor, David Caden, to the point that I still have more hours on Survivor than I do on Killer to this day. I would play Killer to get achievements as sort of a goal, maybe we can 100% the game, but none of the Killers really stuck with me gameplay-wise. I would play one, get the achievements, and then I would go back to Survivor. Until Nemesis, at least. I hated playing pallets. I hated getting bullied as an M1 killer, notably Wraith before Lightburn was changed. And then I meet this guy, Nemesis, who just doesn't have to deal with the M1 gameplay at all. Rad. So I play him a little more than the 65 whip downs you need for the achievement, and then I get to wondering, this is a licensed character. Where's he from? So I start with RE2 Remake, then RE3 Remake. Not gonna talk about the classic game yet, that's a whole different video. But then after that, the rest is history. I play through the whole series, I'm a Resident Evil fan. But that's kind of my entire point again. Dead by Daylight can get people to check out new media that they might not have checked out otherwise. I got into Resident Evil because of this game. I know plenty of people that have checked out the media that their favorite killer comes from, like Silent Hill for Pyramid Head, Hellraiser for Cenobite, Tokyo Ghoul, Scream, Saw. The possibilities are endless. Maybe your next favorite horror movie is right around the corner. So while I do sympathize with people whose favorite license didn't come with this update, it's a monumental occurrence for the game, and we couldn't have had anything else come with it that would really feel like a monumental license. It and Slenderman would be big, yes, but they wouldn't be capital B big. Anyway, we all know that Behavior loves to put licenses into the game, so who's saying that those couldn't be up next? We've still got a few missing, of course, namely those like Candyman or Predator, The Thing, It, Slender, and plenty more that I can't name, otherwise we would be here all day because of how large horror is as a genre, because horror inherently can be any genre. The point is, this game is still, after 10 years, growing. The Hall of Fame of Horror, and it seems less deserving of the name Hall of Fame if it doesn't have the slasher of all time, the guy in a mask, and in a short time, he'll be here. Jason. So, what do you think? Who is your favorite horror villain? This can be anything from games to movies to books, whatever. Who would you like to see in Dead by Daylight? I've been a truther for The Thing for quite some time, and I'm patient. It'll happen. Trust. Please. This has been Horcer. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.